All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here. Today we're doing our first tier list of the new Crimson Blaze season. This is after our tournament, our 1,000-player tournament this past weekend. We have a lot of good data and a lot of interesting, things to talk about today as, in regards to like the viability of different decks in the metagame. There's some new decks, there's some old decks, there's new integrations, new progressions. It's going to be an interesting one today. My tier list videos realistically are just me yapping about decks for like 30, 40 minutes. So if this is a long video, I apologize. Use the timestamps down below to skip ahead or just fast forward to the end if you want to know where I place decks. But my explanations are typically a little bit long-winded, but they might be useful to you guys. Who knows? Before we get into the tier list, though, go ahead and register for the next tournament, which is PMPT number 14, Crimson Christmas. I know it's the holiday weekend and, people are probably busy, but $300 cash in the prize pool. And again, these tournaments are super fun and we really appreciate everybody that comes out to play. So it's free to register. It's Saturday at noontime, December 27th. Link down in the description below if you would like to register for PMPT number 14. Anyway, tier list time. So we have, I think, 18 decks on the tier list this week. These are the most played decks currently in the metagame, unless I'm missing something. And if I am forgetting something, we'll figure it out probably, later in this video, as we go through it. One thing I do need to do, though, here, and this is pretty candid because I forgot, is to pull up our data. Because what I'm going to be using is like overall data from this entire season. However, early metadata isn't that useful because things are changing so rapidly that the common matchups that decks have in the actual cards in the deck lists are changing as time goes on. So just keep that in mind. We're going to be going kind of off the dome here in no particular order. So let's just dive right into it. Don't forget to subscribe. We are on the road to 50,000 subscribers and we'll get there eventually. So hit that subscribe button. I would appreciate it. Anyway, 2 minutes in, now it's tier list time. So, the first deck we're going to talk about is Mega Altaria, because I think Mega Altaria, realistically, is sort of the deck that's maybe at the front of a lot of people's minds right now. It did get first place at this 1,000-plus player tournament this past weekend. And it's definitely a deck list, I think, that deserves to be considered as, a true meta contender. And I think that there's varying different ways to play Altaria. I just think Altaria specifically is very strong right now. But this is going to be the standard version of Altaria right here, which is like, with Jirachi and Chingling and Indeedee. Maybe you're playing Do the Wave Altaria or Sableye. Maybe not because, Altaria, typically doesn't do very well into Oricorio. But there's not a lot of Oricorio currently in the metagame. So that's one progression, one facet of this new meta that we have to account for, which is, Oricorio likely not being that relevant, at least for the next couple of weeks. So what typically happens is that, if Oricorio is really good into a top contending deck list, then maybe it sees play. Altaria might be the catalyst for Oricorio to emerge back into the, meta relevancy, because Altaria traditionally just struggles into Oricorio. Like, I know that you can play the Do the Wave Altaria, you can play Sableye, but again, no matter what you do here, you're probably not going to love the Oricorio matchup, and historically, Altaria doesn't like that matchup. I think one of the big reasons why Altaria was so strong in this early season and in this past weekend was because all of the decks people were playing didn't really play Oricorio, if they weren't playing Oricorio, they were probably playing Chingling, or they should have been playing Chingling, and Altaria doesn't really care about Chingling. So I think Altaria is just very well positioned. This version of Altaria is the 10th most played deck so far this season, but it does have a 53% win rate. Again, we have to account that it did get first place at our tournament. Now, is it the best way to play Mega Altaria? That remains to be seen. I think that there are probably other better variations of Altaria in a metagame right now where Chingling isn't as popular as it should be. A lot of people are going to tell me, what about Altaria and Greninja, right? Because its win rate was so phenomenal this past weekend, and it just really did quite well. It's actually seeing more play than traditional Altaria. And to be honest with you, I think that this deck list here is definitely stronger than traditional Altaria. However, Chingling kind of shuts down the whole Rare Candy Greninja stuff, right? So that's the thing about this deck list. If not a lot of decks are playing Chingling, then you'd probably rather play Greninja. I would expect, and I'm going to be ranking these decks not based around how well they performed this past weekend, but how well I believe that they are positioned to perform in the upcoming week, right? That's really what the tier lists are. They're more of a predictive analysis than anything. So This Altaria, I'm going to keep it A tier. I'm not like super comfortable putting this in the S tier, even though it did get first place. It's a great deck list, and I think that it always has the opportunity to win tournaments and be good in ranked battles. I know ranked isn't out yet, and I do like this deck, but we need to be selective with our S tier placements. And honestly, the way that I look at the metagame right now, there's not that many S tier contenders. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put Altaria right here into like A tier. This is going to be like a high A tier choice in my mind. A very, very strong deck. We'll talk about Altaria and Greninja later in this video, which is actually the more popular way of playing Altaria currently right now or so far this season, which is interesting. Next up, though, let's talk about Magnezone Oricorio, because I just told you Oricorio isn't that relevant in the metagame. There are a couple of decks that play it. Sometimes Jolteon plays it. You know, there's the Steelix Oricorio deck, and then, of course, Dragon Arcana. Altaria also plays sometimes one copy of Oricorio. The thing about Oricorio right now is that a lot of the best cards, or the most popular cards in the game, aren't actually EX cards, and they're not Megas. They're just straight up, you know, non-EX single prize Pokemon. You know, we're talking Hydreigon, we're talking Magnezone, we're talking Greninja, we're talking Lucario, we're talking like Kartana, right? Things in Whimsicott, Helioisk in Magnezone. So there's so many different things, even beginning Jolteon in the Jolteon decks. The meta right now isn't necessarily defined by powerful EX cards like it was maybe in previous seasons. And that's totally fine. And I think that diversity in the metagame is a good thing. Oricorio doesn't have to be meta relevant, especially now with Chingling, protecting us from these rare candy decks. At the same time, I think that Oricorio is still a good Pokemon. It's just not something I would really define as like a driving factor in the metagame. It's sort of just there. And I think really the best deck to play Oricorio in for the last couple of seasons has been Magnezone Oricorio. Now, I do think that playing the new Magnezone is basically better than the old Magnezone. And I think that's kind of just one of the things that happened this season was Magnezone got buffed, right? We played the new Magnemite. Maybe we play, a Alicia package. And that's one of the big things that, this new sort of Magnezone buff did was allow it to be a little bit more seamless into non-lightning type archetypes. And this is a big deal. And I think that this is healthy for the metagame. I think we're going to see things like, Magnezone and Greninja paired with a bunch of different things this season just because they're flexible and they're quality, right? So the new Magnemite, 50 HP, you can use it with Licia. The new Magnezone not discarding any energies when it attacks is pretty good, especially if you're playing in a non-lightning type decks. And the effect of Magnezone's attack is absolutely ridiculous. So I love Magnezone. We're going to talk about it a ton in this video because it is kind of everywhere. But Magnezone Oricorio, in my mind, is really not like a driving deck in the metagame. It's the 9th most played deck so far this season, and it has basically a perfect 50% win rate. Which is totally, respectable. It's not great. It's not bad. If Magnezone or Oricorio were to win next week's tournament, would I be surprised? No. And that's the thing. All of these decks in the video today are considered meta decks. So, some are more popular than others, but if they win, if they do well, then, we're not surprised by it because they're meta decks. So, we're going to go ahead and put Magnezone Oricorio, which is an updated version of it. We're going to put it B tier, and I think this is a very solid B tier choice right now. As long as Oricorio is present in the metagame, it is sort of, I guess projecting its effect onto the metagame. I think that's fine. It doesn't have to be a top tier deck or anything. Magnezone Oricorio was potentially the #1 deck of last season, which is always a little bit crazy. But things were definitely different going into this first week. So Magnezone Oricorio, we're going to put it right there into the B tier. Next up is going to be Blaziken. People are still playing Blaziken. In fact, I would say this is still the best fire type deck in the game. I saw a funny comment the other day. Somebody was mentioning they've given the fire type everything they could possibly need. We have energy acceleration with Magby. We have even further energy acceleration with Charmeleon. We have Flame Patch. We have a lot of different strong attackers. We have Entei for draw power. Like the fire typing seemingly has everything going for it. It just hasn't necessarily been meta relevant for quite some time. I think last season, the main issue with the fire type was that, Suicune Greninja was just the guy. And I think that this season, it's less so the issue of Suicune Greninja and more so the issue of the particular Pokemon we have to utilize aren't as good as we kind of want them to be, or they're not necessarily as well positioned against the other relevant Pokemon. So again, if you take a look at the fire type decks, we have Blaziken and we have Charizard. We'll get to Charizard in a bit, but taking a look at Blaziken, why would we really play Blaziken? At the end of the day, right? Just think about it and everything that we have in the metagame. Why would we play Blaziken above something else? There's really not too much to to answer there. You know, it's like what is Blaziken doing that other decks don't do? It's a rare candy deck, you know, 2 energy attack cost and hits for 140. You know, wouldn't we rather just play Altaria and do 130 damage, but then we could pair it with things like, you know, Chingling very easily. We could pair it with Greninja very easily. These are things that the fire type decks don't have available to them, is, you know, space in the deck or the easy ability to pair them with other strong archetypes and then flex the decks based around the progression of the metagame. Blaziken was a meta deck. It was a very decent deck at multiple times last season, and I think that right now it's definitely an okay choice, but think about all of the other things that we have available to us. You know, we have Hydreigon, we have Magnezone, we have Suicune Greninja, we have the new Lopunny, we got the new Whimsicott package, we got Greninjas, we got everything else in the metagame right now. I think a lot of people would rather play those cards than Blaziken. So, you know, again, Blaziken's not a bad deck. It is the 17th most played deck so far this season, and it has a 50% win rate, about where I would expect Blaziken to be. To me, that means we're putting it here into the B tier. Again, it is a meta deck. This is a strong deck list. Blaziken is a bit more explosive. However, it doesn't love Chingling, and you are a bit reliant on the Heatmor stuff to, you know, maybe target the bench, but then they can sort of not bench anything. It's the strategy's a little bit awkward, and it still doesn't love Oricorio. So that's another factor. Also, Suicune Greninja, still a factor in the metagame, right? Which is a very strong water type deck. We're going to put Blaziken here B tier, and that's how I kind of feel about it. Next up is going to be the first Magnezone deck that we'll talk about today, which is going to be Dark Magnezone, the return of one of the old meta classics, back from the old A2 or A2A era, I forget exactly when Magnezone and Darkrai was relevant, but now we have upgraded Magnezone, we have Chingling, we have Mega Absol, and now we just have a deck list that is very akin to what it was back in the day, but better in almost every aspect, especially with things like Copycat, Clement to search for Magnetons. You know, this archetype hasn't necessarily changed a whole lot. It's just been buffed tremendously, and I think that Magnezone is a good card. I don't know if it's necessarily at face value as good as something like a Greninja is, but it isn't as susceptible to Chingling. So this is why, you know, we have to be very important, or we have to importantly, you know, illustrate the purpose of Chingling in the metagame, which is that Chingling is the best card in the game. It is the best leadoff. It's low impact. You know, you can red card, you can Mars out of Chingling, you can item lock Pokeballs, you can brick people's decks from turn 1, and most importantly, you can stop the turn 2 rare candy. The strongest decks in the game right now are playing rare candy because it is one of the strongest cards. Who would not want a turn 2 Hydreigon on their board? Everybody does. Everybody wants that, and nobody wants to play against that. So again, play Chingling. It's the same with Greninja, right? If your opponent gets a Greninja down on turn 2, you're gonna have to deal with it throughout the entire game. Everything is Cyrusable. The entire game becomes much more difficult with that Greninja on the board, plus the 20 damage every turn. Play Chingling, okay? I don't have anything else to tell you guys, really, in this video other than just to play Chingling in your deck or play a deck that can utilize Chingling effectively. That's it. Anyway, off of that tangent, Magnezone is good. It is good. And I think that, you know, this is a very similar deck to like the Greninja, you know, Darkrai, Mega Absol Chingling deck from last season. It's just, again, instead of, you know, the whole rare candy Greninja, you know, control aspect with Cyrus, we just have Magnezone, which is a little bit of a slower roll here. But again, we're not susceptible to Chingling. Once we get our Magnezones out, you got to go through the mags. And if you can make it through the Magnezones, then you're going to have to stare down things like, you know, a Darkrai with 3 energies or a Mega Absol. And that's, quite frankly, very difficult to get around. So I really do like this deck. It is actually the second most played deck so far this season, and it has a 53% win rate. So to me, this is a top tier deck list, and I think that its impact on the metagame, it hasn't even been like fully realized yet, just because, again, Chingling isn't as popular as I think it probably will be going into like the 2nd or 3rd week. So when you take a look at the raw metagame data, you'll probably notice that things like Hydreigon and Greninja have a little bit more of a volatile win rate so far this season, but again, more people will play Chingling as time goes on, and Magnezone does better to Chingling, into Chingling than those other packages do. So, you know, I really like Dark Mag. I do. You can play Magnezone with Lopunny, which is also on the tier list, and you can even play it with like Altaria, and you can play it with Pinsir if you want, Mega Pinsir. So shout out to Mega Pinsir. A couple of these decks aren't on the tier list. Like, I don't think we have Magnezone Altaria on the tier list, but that is obviously an option. Which is probably pretty good. But the most common way to play Magnezone right now is going to be the Dark package, and I think that makes sense. Whether we play Absol or not, we'll have to wait and see. Again, going first, leading Darkrai, you probably lose the game, but you know what? That's how it goes sometimes. So I like this deck. In fact, I'm going to put it S tier. You know, what are your thoughts about that? I think the Dark package is just broken. I really do. And we had sort of counterplay to, you know, like a lot of the stuff. It's just that it's not as good into all of the other things in the meta. And the meta is so diverse right now that playing a deck list like this, you're not really worried about anything specifically. You know what I mean? That's the cool thing about this deck. It loses to itself sometimes, but if it doesn't, it's just a very difficult deck to beat. A very sound deck, a very quality deck. And I think that Magnezone is likely going to carry pretty well throughout the season, again, mainly because I expect Chingling to become more of a factor as time goes on, and Magnezone does not care that much about Chingling, which is a good thing. So shout out to Dark Mag. He makes his return here, and I'm putting him S tier for at least this first couple of weeks of the season. Next up is Decidueye, which people are playing, but unfortunately, I think the grass type has, now been overcome by these new Whimsicott sort of aggro package decks with Ariados, which I love, and I think it's really cool for the grass type because it's definitely a far cry from the type of grass decks that we've had over the last, whatever it is, like 3, 4, 5 seasons, right? For a while, it was just sort of Decidueye, and Decidueye had a place in the meta specifically because it was good into Suicune. Venusaur released, and people were like, well, okay, so it's kind of like a Decidueye, maybe a little bit better, maybe worse, I don't really know. The issue with Venusaur is that it's kind of the exact same deck as Decidueye, but it has less win condition options, which it obviously isn't great, and it has the same kind of consistency issues. So as far as the grass archetypes go, I really am only looking at Whimsicott as like a really viable strategy, at least in terms of like, real meta contenders. Like I would say Decidueye, Venusaur, these are meta decks, but they're likely going to fall out of play as time goes on. Decidueye is the 19th most played deck from a meta share perspective, technically, even though there are some like kind of duplicate archetypes on Limitless, like Jolteon and Magnezone and Darkrai and stuff like that. But it's technically the 19th most played archetype, and it has a 43% win rate this season, which is not good. It's just not something I think is really worth playing. You're gonna do well into Suicune Greninja, but other than that, I really wouldn't recommend it. I'm not gonna lie. We're gonna put Decidueye like C tier. It has like D tier potential, but I guess we'll just keep it C tier for now. Actually, do we? Yeah, I'll put it C. I mean, come on. I mean, it's a 43%. We'll put it D tier. You know what? We'll put it D tier. I just don't think it's very well positioned currently, and it's not something I would really recommend playing. So, sorry to Decidueye. We're going to put it D tier. It's kind of been replaced a little bit, and the metagame just isn't, like, who's choosing to play Decidueye right now? I just don't really think anybody would be choosing to play Decidueye over other things right now. But anyway, it is what it is. Next up is going to be Magnezone Helioisk, or Aggro Magnezone, or what I call Magro. And Magro is a really fun deck. It is actually fairly, quality. It is a new addition to a fast-paced, aggressive archetype, which, again, was something that was lacking over the last few seasons. Everything was sort of high roll or like tempo. So having a deck list like this that is just, aggressive and just fast paced, I do like it. And I think it's pretty cool. Now its win rate is like a little bit to be desired. It's the 11th most played deck this season, and it has a 47.5% win rate, which to me just isn't very good. And I think that it's one of these things where, like, being the lightning type is interesting, because in the past it was very useful because Suicune was like the most played deck, but now like a bunch of people are playing Magnezone. They're playing Hydreigon, which is also kind of high roll control, which the only way to really stop that is to like play Chingling. There's a lot of like other aggro decks like Whimsicott Ariados now, which is just kind of mowing through your deck list. Lopunny was very common at the beginning of the season, so like that's a fighting archetype that we probably don't love playing against. Suicune's less popular, so it's it's a little bit awkward. Like being an aggressive lightning type deck, if we had this last season, that would have been awesome. It's just this season's a bit different than last season in terms of the decks that are seeing play. I think this deck is good, and people are probably going to be upset with this, but I'm going to put this right now. I'm going to put it C tier, and I know I just said it's good, but C tier decks are still good. These are the top 18 decks in the game, so it's not that this deck is bad. It's just that there's not a lot of advantages to playing an aggressive lightning type deck like this, I think, right now, honestly. That's just what it comes down to. If I'm going to be playing a deck that can kind of pop off and KO stuff, like I'd probably just rather play Hydreigon. And if I am going to be playing Magnezone, I'd rather pair it with a more conducive strategy that's not necessarily just, pop off and hit you in the face with Helioisk. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit, I don't know. It's not exactly what it needs to be for this new season, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it kind of swoops through here and does really well in the next second or third weeks of the season. But for right now, I'm glad that it's in the metagame. I think it's a really cool option. I just don't necessarily consider it to be, super like top tier. It's a C tier deck in my mind, which is what it is. What do you want from me? Okay, I mean, it didn't. What did it do this weekend? You know, and I mean, I maybe it placed well at other tournaments, but you know, I'm looking at its meta share here. I'm looking at its win rates. It's definitely not, you know, incredible. It's not bad. I think C tier is a proper placement for it, quite frankly. I do. I think it's fine. Next up, though, is Suicune and Greninja. Yeah, so, you know, I think that, you know, this season eventually might just boil down into people playing Suicune and Greninja. Partly because it's still like the strongest deck in the game, or at least one of the strongest decks in the game. Hasn't seen nearly as much play as it did last season, which I think is cool. But again, as time goes on, people get bored of the new stuff. They're just going to default to whatever they think is going to allow them to rank up quickly or win games in tournaments, right? And I think Suicune Greninja is still a top tier deck. And again, less Chingling running around. We need more Chingling because, you know, things like Hydreigon and Greninja are just going to run away with things if we don't, you know, play more Chingling. But yeah, Suicune Greninja, the third most played deck so far this season, only a 7% meta share. Things are very spread out this season. And it has a, guess what, a 53% win rate. So it's still, you know, very well. It's been doing very well. It had about a 50% win rate at our tournament this past weekend. It didn't have like a big impact, but again, not many people played it. So it was hard to really gauge Suicune. I do think that, you know, based off its like performances this weekend, I'd put it like high B tier, low A tier. But again, you know, we all understand what's going on here with Suicune Greninja. We know that it's better than what it probably seems early this season, and it's likely going to see more play as the season goes on. So I feel pretty comfortable putting Suicune Greninja A tier for now, but I think it definitely could just make an S tier push like in the second or third week, and then we have to counterplay it yet again. Maybe not. Maybe enough, you know, Magnezone stuff sees play. Maybe enough Jolteon. You know, maybe enough, you know, Chingling sees play to keep Suicune at bay. But for now, I definitely can't neglect putting it any lower than A tier. You know what I mean? Like, it's fallen off, but not nearly as much as people might think. And it's probably going to rise back up as time goes on, unless we make sure it doesn't. So, you know, keep that in mind. Next up, we have Lopunny and Lucario. And, you know, shout out to Lopunny, right? I mean, how long were people waiting for a quality fighting type deck to enter the metagame and really become like a real deck? You know, it took us a long time. We had like Rampardo stuff for a little bit. We had Garchomp for a bit, but like, you know, Lopunny, I think, has the potential to be like an actual playable, you know, meta deck this season. It's the fourth most played deck so far, and it does have a 51% win rate. So it hasn't like come in and absolutely shocked the world or anything, but it is definitely a legitimate card. There's a lot of RNG layers to Lopunny, which I think, you know, maybe turns a lot of people off from the card. But you also got to keep in mind that the confusion is guaranteed. And on average, we're dealing, 90 damage, which is like pretty cool. I mean, it's not a terrible attack, but it's also not a... It's a pretty good attack. Like it's an interesting card. 190 HP. It is a stage 1 Pokemon. Now the thing with Lopunny, truthfully, is that it is a double fighting energy attack cost card. So it's similar to like Absol, but it's different because it's a stage 1 Pokemon. So, you know, we have to kind of commit the Baniri and the Lopunny in our deck list, just like we would Altaria, but there's really not that many great fighting type cards that you would really want to play with Lopunny. So the most popular way that people are playing it is going to be sort of a mix of like aggressive, you know, aggro package with things like Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee or Hitmontop with Fighting Coach Lucario. So you play that sort of aggro fighting package, and then on the back end, you know, you have Mega Lopunny to finish the game. And I think that's sort of maybe what the developers intended with Mega Lopunny. I think that there's just maybe we don't have enough like fighting stuff. You know, like it's cool that they gave us Lopunny, but what about like everything else that we could possibly be playing? You know, Fighting Coach Lucario came out so long ago, and this is really the default support like backline card for our fighting decks. Like what happened here? Do we not have anything else? You know, that's what's crazy. Hitmonchan is interesting. In fact, the highest placing fighting type deck of our tournament was Hitmonchan. It's not on the tier list, but maybe it does make its way under the tier list later in the season if more people end up playing it. Lopunny's performances this past weekend, even though it was like the second most played deck, it had a pretty low win rate. So, you know, in our tournament specifically, it didn't do that well. And honestly, I think that Lopunny is really kind of taking advantage of you know, the fact that, you know, a lot of the decks in the game are playing lightning type Pokemon like Magnezone, right? Magnezone is very popular. Jolteon was fairly popular. So I like Lopunny. I am kind of on the fence about it. Like, I just don't know how much I believe in this deck list to consider it to be like a you know, a mainstay throughout this entire season, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, what do you guys think of Mega Lopunny? Because I think it's just maybe a little bit off of being like a top tier deck. Maybe it just needs like something else to pair with it. Maybe we just haven't figured out the deck yet. Like some people are playing it with Lucario, which is the archetype that we're ranking here. Some people are playing it with Magnezone, which is cool. The upside to Lopunny is that there is a 50 HP Baneri, so we can play, you know, like with Chingling, or we can just play it with Magnemite and play it like the Lycia package, which is pretty cool. Yeah, at the end of the day, the deck does have some RNG to it. You know, the fighting type as an offensive type isn't necessarily that good in the meta. You know, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put Lopunny like high B tier. I'm not feeling an A tier placement quite yet for Mega Lopunny. But I think maybe, I don't know. You know, it's hard to say. I guess it is sort of immune to Chingling, right? So maybe as like the season goes on, if Chingling sees more play, then maybe it's more viable. That definitely could be a factor, right? Yeah, I mean, I think I have to just kind of keep it high B tier for now. I don't feel like extremely strongly about it to put it A tier, but it is definitely good. So I think high B tier is sort of the accurate placement for me for Mega Lopunny. Comment down below if you disagree. How do you guys, are you enjoying this video? I record these things and I just sort of like give my thoughts. Like I just talk for a bit. Some people watch these videos, which is cool. So shout out to you guys. I love it. I just enjoy talking about Pokemon Pocket because I find it all very interesting, and I'm a very data-driven person. And you know, I try to just give you what I think makes the most sense. You know what I mean? Like I do all of the analysis and I just tell the truth here. I'm not trying to like clickbait anything. I'm just trying to help people out. But anyway, enough of that tangent. Lopunny going high B tier. Next up is going to be Mega Steelix with Pichu and Oricorio. I did make a video, you know, day one of this set saying, hey, here's the new strongest deck list. I typically just like to highlight a deck that I think is going to give people the advantage at that very moment at the beginning of the season. Last season, it was Absol Oricorio that did end up winning the first tournament, but the progression of this season was very different. It was very, very different. I think that in that first like day, maybe 2 days, the Oricorio stuff was very powerful because people weren't accounting for it. But, you know, once the weekend rolled around, once we were like 4, 5, 6 days into the season, you know, Oricorio really was not that big of a factor. Lots of Magnezones, lots of Hydreigon. So realistically, I think that as far as Oricorio decks go, I do really like the Steelix deck, but it's very slow. And if Oricorio isn't a factor, then the deck is going to struggle for sure. So it has a lot of, you know, issues in terms of like, you know, when you take a look at the overall scope of the metagame and what people are playing, right? There are going to be some matchups there where the slow burn of the deck and the combination of Oricorio is just going to help you win games. But again, a lot of things in the meta right now don't really care about Oricorio. And don't mind if Steelix takes 3 turns to get set up, you know, so that's the thing about Mega Steelix. So this is the 18th most played deck so far this season, and it has a 46.5% win rate. Again, a lot of the Oricorio win rates are very low just because Oricorio is not very good right now. I'm going to be putting Steelix probably also, I mean, it's either D tier or C tier. I did put Magnezone Oricorio B tier because I think it's the best Oricorio option still. But I'm going to be putting this probably C tier. Like, I don't really want to put it D tier. I'm going to put it like low C tier. Again, its win rate isn't too substantial. I don't think many people are going to go this direction with Steelix. Steelix as a card is interesting. I just don't think it's like that good. You know, it's interesting. Like the mega Pokemon that they've given us, at least this season or this expansion, really aren't anything that incredible. You know, like I remember seeing Mega Absol and I was like, this card is like not that good. And then I saw like all of the other Mega Pokemon that they released and I was like, actually, you know, relatively speaking, Absol's pretty good. It's pretty funny because like the Mega Pokemon are like relatively weak. They definitely have kind of overbalanced them a bit. Some are pretty relevant. Again, like we have Absol, we have like Lopunny right now. Altaria is very good. But most Megas are pretty underwhelming for the 3 prize cost. And I think that they could easily be worth it. It's just the game, you know, I think the developers are being a little bit conservative in terms of the quality of Mega Pokemon that they're providing, at least for now, which I think is totally fine. But Mega Steelix, we'll put it like low C tier for sure. I think that's all right. Man, okay, next up's Venusaur, and I don't want to like step on anybody's toes here with Venusaur. I don't want to make anyone feel bad with Venusaur because I do think that this is a strong card. But it's a very linear deck, and it does sort of the same thing. It's got glaring issues that, you know, there's not a lot of ability to kind of work around them. You know what I mean? It's just, you know what Venusaur is going to do. You can either counterplay it or deal with it, or you can't, and it's just going to beat you. But, you know, the thing with Venusaur is that it does have access to Quick Growth Extract. It's got a lot of HP. You know, it's got the sleep, and it's got the poison. Like, it's a strong Pokemon. But, you know, how many 4 energy attack cost stage 2 Pokemon in the game have ever been that relevant, you know? And it doesn't really matter, like, you know, how much HP it has or how much damage it's doing. It's just, you know, are we even able to get this Pokemon out consistently enough? I think Quick Growth Extract helped with it. but that also gets turned off by Chingling. So effectively, you're just playing a really big, tanky, bulky Decidueye, which, you know, does have its value, but at the same time, you know, we can't hit the bench, and that's definitely one of the inherent strengths of Decidueye. Venusaur going to be pretty good, I think, into Suicune, but other than that, I don't know if I would really, you know, consider Venusaur to be that strong amongst the other decks in the game. Because again, you know, the meta's pretty quick. You know, Chingling exists. We got Hydreigon Rare Candies. You know, we got Lopunny coming in turn 2, swinging for 180. You know, we got Whimsicott, which I think can almost one-hit KO a Venusaur with double Ariados and its 4 energy attack cost. Charizard is still seeing a little bit of play in the metagame. Also, Venusaur will have to go through like double Magnezone sometimes, which you just don't want to do. You don't want to have to go through double Magnezone and then go through like a Darkrai or an Absol. Like, you're just probably not going to be able to win, or have to go through double Hydreigons. Like, imagine being a little Ivysaur trying to build up, and then it's just turn 2 130 to the face, because we're not playing anything in our deck to stop Hydreigon from rare candying and just, you know, exploding on us. Just coming in and saying, yo, what are you gonna do? You know, and we'll get to Hydreigon in a minute, because that's my guy right now. I love Hydreigon. A ridiculous card. But Venusaur, realistically, it's D tier. It is. In fact, I would actually put it below Decidueye. I think it's actually probably worth more still playing Decidueye, just because you have more flexible win conditions. And I just again, I like Whimsicott. I like Venusaur as a card. It's just, you know, it's not enough. It's just not good enough. Is the reality, you know? Don't hate me for that. I like Venusaur. A lot of the new megas were pretty underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. Venusaur going D tier with Decidueye. These decks just have not done anything. Like, I just can't recommend you play these decks based around everything else we have available to us. Next up is going to be Whimsicott Ariados. This is going to be a tough one to judge, because you know, its average win rate isn't too crazy. It's about a 49% win rate, which again is below 50%. It did make it to grand finals. It is actually doing better at more recent tournaments. I think early on in the season, people weren't building this deck correctly. But the cool thing about Whimsicott Ariados is that you could build this deck to be very good into Hydreigon. And that's going to be sort of the main factor for Whimsicott right now for me is, you know, the ability to play Kartanas in the deck and just be really strong into Hydreigon, I think provides a ton of value, a massive amount of value here. Whimsicott is, I think, the de facto grass deck right now. And it's cool because it's very different than other grass type decks. It's a stage 1 deck. It's an aggressive deck. And I just like it, you know, and I think Ariados is kind of broken. You know, it not only boosts the damage for Whimsicott, but the actual effect of increasing retreat costs is a good effect, because oftentimes your opponent's looking to just retreat out, you know? So like, if they can't retreat their Chingling or their Oricorio in the active, or if you're playing an Absol deck and they just happen to, you know, lead Mega Absol and all of a sudden their retreat cost is 3 energies, like, you kind of win the game, you know? And again, a lot of Charizard running around, like some Lopunny stuff was running around this season, but those things are probably going to dip down in play a little bit as time goes on. I really do like Whimsicott Ariados. I think it's a quality card right now, and it's just something that we haven't had that much of in the last couple of seasons. So, you know, it did make grand finals and it lost, but, you know, I like that Kartana list into Hydreigon. You know, we're going to get to Hydreigon in a bit. I think it's sort of the big dog currently right now this season, and any deck that I think has a good position into that top deck, I think is worth playing. So, you know, even though its average win rate so far this season on Limitless is showing a pretty low win rate at 49%, I do think that this deck has a lot more to it, and I think it's actually going to get better as time goes on, as more people are playing, you know, improved, you know, better versions of the deck list. So, yeah, I'm going to be putting Whimsicott A tier. I think it's going to be below probably a lot of the other A tier decks, but this is a legit meta contender right now, and I like it. I'm going to put it A tier. That might be biased. Maybe you guys agree, maybe you don't. But I do like Whimsicott. I think it's just strong. I really do. I think it's a good deck. Nothing else to really say about it, I guess. It's just a good deck. I like it. Aggro grass. I mean, when was the last time we had an aggressive grass deck? I guess kind of Buzzwole could be aggressive in some ways, but I don't know if I really would classify it as like a real aggro deck. Yeah, maybe that's kind of the closest thing. It's been a long time. Shout out to Whimsicott. Next up is going to be High Roll Control, or rather, you know, Mega Absol and then Greninja and Chingling. I mean, this deck is broken. This deck was broken last season towards the end. It really just came down to like, well, you know, if we're playing against Suicune and Greninjas, like, why not just play Greninja, Absol, and Chingling? So, you know, I think it's going to be one of those things where is my phone dinging here? Hold on. Sorry about that. I think my phone was like ringing or whatever. My bad. Yeah, what was it? Okay, so, you know, you're playing double Greninja, you're playing double Cyrus, and you're playing Chingling. And that in itself is going to give you so many options to win games. Like, this is a deck that just plays broken Pokemon in it. And I know, like, the meme going around is that I think that Mega Absol, or people think I think that Mega Absol isn't a good card, even though literally, like, day 2 of last season, I admitted that Absol was better than I thought it was. The strength of Absol is, one, a lot of the other Mega Pokemon are really weak. So the weakness of Absol was that it wasn't that good into other Megas. But again, not many people are playing Mega Pokemon because most of them aren't that good. So you can just throw one Mega Absol into your deck list and it's not impacting your deck at all much in a negative way. Of course, other than if you lead Absol going first, that doesn't feel great. But you know, other than that, it's just a strong deck. I mean, and Absol's a strong card, and it doesn't impact like a deck list like this that much. It's just, yeah, it's like item block plus Greninja Cyrus, and then I have an Absol on the back end. It is just enough to win most games. And it's, you know, not the most consistent strategy in the world. However, it is more consistent than the Altaria Greninja deck. I do think that this is a very quality, you know, strategy. You know, and I think Greninja's kind of slept on. You know, a lot of Magnezone, a lot of Hydreigon right now, but again, as time goes on, especially if people just don't play Chingling, I think Greninja's going to run away with the metagame because it's the same as last season. You know, bench damage and Cyrus is the primary win condition in Pokemon Pocket, and it has been for a while, so we can't disrespect, you know, strategies like this. I think that Mega Absol Greninja, what is this? It's the 8th most played deck so far this season, and it has a 53.5% win rate. Very, very quality. I think it literally does deserve to see more play. I'm going to put this A tier. I'm going to put this A tier, but I'm going to put it above like Whimsicott. I'm going to put it right here. It's just a good deck, man. I'll put it up here, actually. This is just a quality deck. You know, if you're playing Chinglings and Greninjas and stuff, like, you're not going to struggle at that much. You know, you're gonna be all right. Trust me. You're gonna be doing fine. And that's kind of how I feel about it. Next up, we have Hydreigon. Yeah, here we go. I mean, what can we say about Hydreigon? I mean, this card really is, you know, one of the most toxic things in the entire game. I'm just glad they gave us Chingling realistically, because like when you play against this deck and they're going first and they lead Dino, you're like, oh, geez, Louise. You know, you're like, I mean, I could red card him, I could Mars him, you know, but I mean, as long as I don't have an item lockdown, they're probably just gonna find a way to copycat or research into rare candy Hydreigon, and we're gonna get just blown away. So, you know, I think that this early metagame, people just disrespected Chingling. I saw so many comments. I saw so many mentions of people saying, oh, I don't think Chingling's that good. I don't think Chingling's as good this season. I wouldn't play Chingling. I don't think it's as worth playing. And then guess what? And then literally Hydreigon completely ran away with this so far of this early meta. If you take a look at our tournament, it didn't get first or second or third place, but it was literally like 40% of our day 2 metagame, which, you know, in itself is absolutely ridiculous. There's just not a lot of counterplay to Hydreigon. There's not a lot you can do to it other than like get that item locked down, stop them from going and popping off early, and then setting up your board state. Because like if you don't have the time to set up your board and your Pokemon and attach your energies, like you're gonna lose to Hydreigon because it doesn't care about any of that. It doesn't matter. It's just going to rare candy and start destroying you every turn for 130 damage. And trust me, you cannot keep up with it. Plus the Indeedee stuff, plus the giant capes, like this thing's just sticking around. And it has a drawback. Like, you know, at face value, Hydreigon's like, yeah, but it takes 30 damage or whatever, right? To get itself set up. But then it's like, okay, you know, but we have Indeedee to heal 20. We have giant capes. It's like all of a sudden, like, what is it? We're just paying 10 energies. We're just paying 10 damage to just hit for 130 for free. Like, does that seem like a fair trade? Not really, right? It's a broken card. It's an absolutely broken card, but it does have counterplay. And people just, honestly, I would just recommend playing Chingling and play something that can deal enough damage to Hydreigon to kind of pressure it to not be able to attack multiple turns in a row, right? Which requires you to hit for like 130, 140 damage, which does sort of, you know, like it removes a lot of things from the game. Like Altaria specifically is going to be nice with Chingling for sure. You know, Lopunny can do that, Suicune can do that, Whimsicott can do that. But there's some stuff in the game that just doesn't hit for that much damage or can't do it on turn 2 or turn 3. And like, that's the stuff that's just going to fall to the wayside because Hydreigon really is sort of the benchmark right now. It's just like, can you keep up? If not, like, just don't play your deck because Hydreigon is here and you're going to play it a ton. You know, and I bet people that competed in day 2 of the tournaments, like, thought the same way, where they were like, man, like if that's what the metagame is, like we need to reevaluate what's going on here. Anyway, that's a long answer to say Hydreigon is S tier, and it is sort of the top dog right now. To be honest, both of these decks are almost identical. One's just playing Magnezone and one's playing Hydreigon. I put the Greninja version down here, but you could just put like it also S tier, and then all of a sudden you have literally the exact same 3 decks just playing Hydreigon, Greninja, and Mega and Magnezone. In fact, I might just do that. I literally might do that because I do think that these are probably just the best decks in the game. Even though like the results may have varied a little bit, like these are the best strategies. Like just play the dark package because it's low impact, and then play whatever package you think is best, whether that's Greninja, Magnezone, or Hydreigon. And that's really what this meta is going to boil down to, which again, like you're going to want to play Chingling. So do that if you can. Even the Hydreigon decks play Chingling because they understand, they know the mirror matchup. So they're playing Chingling. So we're going to upgrade it to, we're going to upgrade Dark Greninja here to S tier. I mean, that's it. Like, that's the meta. It's Absol, and then whatever broken, card is in the deck list. Like, that's the reality of it, honestly. Are we, though? I mean, yeah, whatever. We'll just keep that S tier. Next up's going to be Lopunny Magnezone. So this was actually the highest placing Lopunny of our tournament. But again, I just don't, I think this deck is kind of more high roll than you kind of want Magnezone to be, right? You have to set up multiple evolution Pokemon. The RNG aspect of this deck is very, very toxic, like playing the Magnezone mirror shot effect plus the confusion with Mega Lopunny. Like it does kind of seem pretty hilarious. But there's a lot of moving factors to the deck list. You can play Lycia, which is cool. I think this deck has potential, but again, if I'm playing Magnezone, am I really going to choose to play it with Lopunny? It feels like we're kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole, and like it's kind of working. It gets definitely like not bad, but it just doesn't make as much sense maybe just to play some of these other decks. You know what I mean? I'm going to put Lopunny Magnezone here. By the way, Lopunny Magnezone is the 20th most played deck and has a 49% win rate. So it's actually overall win rate isn't even that high. I'm also going to put it B tier. In fact, I'm going to just put it like right next to the other Lopunny because I don't think it's necessarily changing the viability of the deck that much to play Magnezone, honestly. Next up, where are we at? Yeah, so Jolteon. Okay. Jolteon is really good. Jolteon is one of those things that I think has just retroactively gotten buffed this season. With Magnezones everywhere, with Hydreigon everywhere, water type decks like Suicune are still popular. Like I really like Jolteon. We talked about it last season every week of it just being not that good, like not good enough. I think this season's kind of changed things for whatever the reason. It's just a good Pokemon. It's just a good deck. And it's sort of like the better aggro lightning deck than Magnezone and Helioisk is, because you have the bench damage with Jolteon's effect and you have Cyrus, so you have that whole aspect of the deck list. As long as Magnezone and Hydreigon see a ton of play, which these are Pokemon that like to kind of set up on the bench or whatever. I guess Hydreigon doesn't always, but if Hydreigon uses its ability, like every turn it's taking 60 damage, right? Which is valuable when you're playing Jolteon. It also lives a hit from Hydreigon unless they're playing Giovanni, so that's relevant. I just think Jolteon's good. I think it's just more well positioned right now than most other decks, which is kind of funny. So, shout out to Jolteon, man. I'm going to put it A tier. I am. It's kind of an interesting trend now that I'm seeing my tier list is like we have like the actual archetypes as they were sort of meant to be, being like Altaria, Suicune, Whimsicott, Jolteon. Like these are all like decks that like have like cohesive, fusions of cards of their same types. And then we just have the dark package thrown with whatever kind of broken stuff you can, which to be fair is kind of just the strongest thing in the game. So, that's why I make fun of Absol though. I make fun of Absol because it's like, it's not even like the card in any of its decks. It's just, we just play one Absol and then, and then we're just going to sit here and call it an Absol deck. Like, Hydreigon is not an Absol deck. Like these Magnezone Darkrai decks is not an Absol deck. Even Greninja Absol, which is probably the most Absol deck out there, isn't even really an Absol deck. It's just a Greninja like Chingling deck. So it's kind of funny. That's why I disrespect Absol or I joke about it, but all of the strongest decks in the game are playing Absol. So at the end of the day, what can we really say about it? You know what I mean? What can we really say? It is interesting. Next up's going to be Charizard. Charizard, the 7th most played deck so far this season, and it has, you guessed it, a 45% win rate, which isn't even that bad. It's not great, but it's not that bad. I think people slept on Charizard, they didn't sleep on Charizard, but they really thought it would be like the best deck in the game. And the thing with Charizard is that it's a strong card. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you. Like there is a timeline, or in the future potentially, where Charizard is just the guy. And it is sort of the benchmark. It's like, do you really want to play Mega Pokemon? Do you really? Because if any meta deck or Mega deck becomes exceedingly popular, then you're gonna lose to Charizard because it's just the same type of stuff where it's like, well, my mega beats your mega, game over, you know, and Charizard is that sort of thing. So, you know, Charizard maybe like in a weird way is gonna stop any mega Pokemon from dominating just because it'll probably just lose to Charizard. But the thing about Charizard is that it kind of loses to everything that's not a mega deck. You know what I mean? And that's the thing about Charizard is like doing 250 is broken, but like if you don't need 250, like who cares about it? You know what I mean? I'd rather just do 130 over and over and over again on a single prize Pokemon than deal 250 on a 3 prize Pokemon and deal 50 damage to myself. Quite honestly, that's the reality of it. And it's 4 energy attack cost. It's like high risk, high reward. That reward is valuable sometimes. If I can KO a Mega Altaria and win the game, sweet, you know, but like I don't want to go through 2 Magnezones. I don't want to do that. Well, my deck is not built to do that, right? That's not what Charizard does. So, you know, the metagame right now is very not Charizard friendly, but there is potential for Charizard to be very relevant at some point in the meta. Charizard's going to go C tier. I'm going to put it actually like middle C tier. I don't think it's that bad. You know, I really don't. I just don't think it's well positioned. And, you know, now maybe is not the time for Charizard. Maybe they gave him to us a little bit early. It does absolutely destroy Venusaur. It absolutely destroys Blastoise. It destroys like the other big megas that like, you know, are strategies in some decks, but like, you know, not really. I wonder, does Altaria, I mean, it probably does well into Altaria as well, honestly. But yeah, you know, Charizard, it's not terrible, but it's really not. It's not like the guy right now, that's for sure. Like it's not running the show, but it is very good. Next up, let's talk about like the big standout of this past weekend, which is Altaria Greninja, because this is again, it's the same concept as like the Mega Absol Greninja, where it's like we're playing Chingling and we're playing Greninja, which this weekend specifically ended up being absolutely broken. Specifically, I think into like the into the Hydreigon stat. Like that's really where I think this deck just kind of blew up in terms of its average win rate. And it was a very specifically good meta call. Now this deck list probably is also S tier. It feels weird to put double like 3 decks S tier. But I mean, the win rate of this deck specifically into Hydreigon is so good. Like it's specifically just very good into that matchup. You know what I mean? If you look at its matchup spreads, like it's got like a 56% win rate into Hydreigon, which doesn't seem that good, but into Hydreigon is specifically is a really big deal. It's also a deck that's good into Jolteon and it's good into Whimsicott, which is kind of unique, right? So like, you know, when you take a look at everything that's going on in the metagame, you know, this is a deck that kind of just beats a lot of the stuff that people are trying to play. You know, I'm actually going to backpedal a little bit. I am. I'm gonna backpedal just slightly, and you guys might not like this. I'm gonna put Mega Altaria S tier, and I'm gonna put Mega Absol A tier. This is what I'm gonna do here. I'm actually gonna demote this deck because I do think it's probably a tier below this deck, and this deck is so much similar. They're effectively the same deck. This one's just playing Altaria instead of Absol. I think Altaria does better into Hydreigon than Mega Absol does, so that's why I'm gonna actually swap these. And these are sort of my top tier decks right now, and I would say that Mega Absol and Greninja is definitely a good deck. But at the same time, I think that if Hydreigon's seeing a bunch of play, which it is, I would rather just play the Altaria version. So that's going to be my change there. The last minute change, a game time decision here. Yeah, this Mega Altaria deck, it's just good. It is high roll. It does rely on coin flips a little bit. Like the thing about this deck though is that it has an answer to Chingling and the Chingling lock, right? Which is like, you know, like if we want to get our Greninjas out, but we can't. If our opponent has us on the Chingling lock, what we can do is go into Swablu and put that Chingling asleep and then go, hey, look at that. You know, we get a turn to Rare Candy Greninja and then, you know, good luck. And it also plays Chinglings. So, you know, that's really why I think this deck was broken. It's a Chingling deck playing Greninja and a big Pokemon that can tank hits from Hydreigon and potentially KO Hydreigon. So that's really relevant, I think, you know. It's a really big deal. That's why I'm going to swap them. I mean, I'm going to put Altaria Greninja S tier, and we'll put Mega Absol Greninja, you know, high A tier. I think that's probably fine, honestly. So that's what we're going to do there. Lastly, we have, what do we have? We have Dragon Arcana, which is still on the tier list. It is still a deck list. This is kind of what I would say the other aggro deck. This was kind of the only other like real aggressive deck last season, which was the Dragon Arcana Altaria, and really enforcing that like 2/2 or that 1/1 prize trade, which felt really decent into a lot of different decks last season. It made grand finals in a tournament later last season. It's a really cool deck list, and I do think it's actually just pretty decently quality. I don't know if I would really call this like, you know, an A tier deck. Mainly just because not that many people are playing it. It's the 16th most played deck, but it does have a 51% win rate, and I think it's consistent. And it also plays, Oricorio, which is kind of funny, but it is a Mega Altaria deck, and I think all Mega Altaria decks are pretty good. I think selfishly, I'm just going to put this one like high A tier. I'm just going to put it like right here. Maybe I'll put it like right in between the Lopunnies. So no, I'll just put it right here. It's fine. The orders and the tiers don't really matter that much for the tier lists, but I do think that this is a quality deck list. I just don't know if it's really ever going to see that much play in favor of like the other decks that are, seeing play right now, So that's one of those things where it's like, if I'm going to rank decks based around, I think their performance and how well they'll perform moving forward, whether I think they're going to be seeing a lot of play or not does factor into it, right? Because, a deck is only as good as how many people are playing it, right? In a sense. And I think that is definitely a factor to it. So yeah, that's it, guys. It's a longer video today. It's a 50-minute long video, but I like to share all my thoughts here. I had a good time recording this. This is my tier list. Honestly, I think these 3 decks here just have more going for them than anything else. I just think they're playing either insanely broken strategies, or they're just specifically good into one another, or good into other viable archetypes, no matter what happens over this next week in the meta progressions, like I feel confident that all 3 of these decks are going to be pretty good. Hydreigon is the more volatile thing because it is sort of the thing that everybody has their eyes on, and they're going to be counter playing it. So that's the only thing. I do think Dark Magnezone is just consistent and it's broken. In fact, I actually kind of like the Magnezone package with the Darkrai Absol more than I like Greninja with it. So, it's interesting, right? It's a weird kind of thing there. And then again, Greninja Altaria is just insane. It's just a ridiculous deck. It's just so silly. It's just like, what is going on? But yeah, I think that Chingling is broken. Play Chingling, it'll win you games. And I think that Mega Altaria is just so consistent and so broken that I think it deserves mention. Everything here in A tier is very good. Again, this Altaria won our tournament this weekend. That doesn't mean that it's like an S tier deck automatically, but anything that I put in S tier, I'm not surprised if it wins. You know what I mean? So that's why the 2 decks that made finals this weekend are A tier, not S tier. I just don't think they're as good as the S tier decks. That doesn't mean they can't win. People get that confused all the time, right? They're like, why would a deck in A tier have placed higher than a deck in S tier? It's like, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? A deck's, I guess like, you can't judge a deck based on like the highest placement that it got, right? If like one deck made day 2 and it happened to make grand finals as opposed to one other deck, which, 40% of day 2 was that deck and it did make grand finals, that doesn't make it better than that deck. It just means that that's how the brackets, fell. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm done with tangents here. It's a long video. Let's wrap this up, guys. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Again, this tier list is going to change a ton over the next few weeks, but this is sort of my early interpretation of how I would rank all of the meta decks currently in the metagame. Maybe new decks pop up. We really don't know. It's really, the season's definitely still an open book considering that Altaria just won week 1. So we have no idea what's going to happen, but it is going to be fun to follow along. And by the time rank comes out in a couple of weeks after the holiday season, everything will be sort of more figured out and we'll have a more concrete definition of the meta, which is always a good time. Long one today. Let's wrap up this video. And again, don't forget to go register for our tournament this weekend, PMPT 14. It's going to be a fun one. Happy holidays to everybody. I'll probably upload a video every day. Honestly, I'll just keep uploading videos. But if you celebrate, Christmas or anything like that, then happy holidays. And, going into the new year, it's going to be a fun one for sure. So yeah, that's it. I have nothing else to say. It's a long video. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.